Not to be confused with Le Mans, the 1971 film, which my dad took me to see. I remember being taken to the cinema by my dad to see Le Mans. I had no idea what Le Mans was.
Classic dad's film.
Classic dad's film, absolutely was. It's a film
using old gender stereotypes there.
Yeah, that was kind of inherent in the saying classic dad, which is now a sort of slightly snarky way of, like dad jokes. Anyway, so not to be confused with Le Mans, although in other territories, the film is called Ford v Ferrari, which therefore couldn't be confused with Le Mans, but does sound like a legal case.
It's okay. Kramer versus
exactly, in the opening, Ford v Ferrari. So it's a story of how the Ford Motor Company was trying to regain its mojo against Ferrari at a time when, quote, James Bond does not drive a Ford. Or as Tracy Letts' Henry Ford II says, that's because he's a degenerate. They call in Carroll Shelby as this automobile designer and got a cowboy hat wearing good old guy played by Matt Damon. And he wants to call in Ken Miles, who is a war vet and a race car driver played by Christian Bale. Ken Miles is a loose cannon, goes his own way. He's not above throwing a spanner at someone if he's having an argument with them. And in fact, there is spanner throwing at the very beginning of the film, and that then becomes a sort of talismanic object which runs through the film. He has a philosophy of racing that approaches Zen. Here he is explaining it to his son.
You can't just push the car hard the whole way, right?
That's right. You have to be kind to the car. You feel the poor thing groaning underneath you. If you're going to push a piece of machinery to the limit and expect it to hold together, you have to have some sense of where that limit is. Look out there. Out there is the perfect lap. No mistakes. Every gear change, every corner. Perfect. You see it.
Where's he from?
Well, to me, that sounded like East Midlands. That sounded like Derby, Nottingham, Leicester, something like that.
Yeah, technically West Midlands, I think, but sort of. I think he's born in Birmingham.
Was it more of a Brummie? Okay.
Yeah, yeah. Right. Well. The interesting thing about it is that I think the accent sort of starts there and then it takes a few geographical laps around the sort of surrounding area, including an occasional detour into Wallace and Gromit territory, replete with lots of stuff about a cup of tea, and so that happens quite a lot. And at one point, there's an English guy in the pits who says, "God blimey!" So it's played for a certain audience. I think it is actually to the film's credit that the sort of the strangeness of the accent, the kind of slightly cartoony nature of some of the accents actually doesn't detract from the film. In fact, in many ways, it adds to its sense of fun and adventure. Now, like Senna, it has at its heart a kind of chalk and cheese pairing. Not just between, on the one hand, Matt Damon character, is a kind of good old boy, cowboy hat, all that stuff, and then Miles, who we just heard, chucks spanners around, but also between the radical thinking, car designers, drivers, and on the other hand, the uptight corporate Ford Motor Company. And they want Miles out and Shelby wants him in, and everybody wants to win and to win against the red cars of Ferrari. And the film's directed by James Mangold, whose career began with like Heavy and Copland, sort of very character-heavy dramas. And he went on to make Logan, which is the most sort of character-driven superhero movie of all. I think people could make an argument about Joker, perhaps. Although he did have a fight with Studio and Wolverine. And I know that some people have... I mean, if you think, for example, of Coppola's Tucker the Man in His Dream, which was a story about cars, which was really about the difficulties of making films in the filmmaking system. And you can sort of see that here as well. You can see that Ford versus Ferrari thing. It's also art versus commerce. Bale is, I suppose, to some extent, the more respected actor. But for me, the star turn in this was Matt Damon, who I thought was great. I bought into his character completely, absolutely got me into the film. The race sequences are terrific. Like that Ron Howard film, Rush, it has that really kind of, which of course took its lead from Senna, that really sort of fantastically crunchy sound design. That, you kind of feel every gear change. And also, they filmed it in a way. I was listening to an interview with Matt Damon, and he said that one of the things that they've done is that they've put the characters in the cars, which are actually being driven by somebody else. They've constructed them. So you film somebody in a car that is moving, at quite a whack, but it's being driven by somebody else. But it's not like just sort of CGIing them on. You actually get the sense that they are on. So the film does that thing about putting you in the cockpit on the racetrack, and the race sequences are very, very tense. I don't know how any of them turned out, because I don't know anything about motor racing other than what I know from the movies. There's a point which doesn't quite work for me, which is a kind of philosophical thing about at 7,000 revs you hit this kind of plateau of perfection at which everything else melts away and you become one with the engine, and that was kind of slightly didn't quite work for me. What really did was the relationship between that central Christian Bale's character and his wife, who's played by Catriona Balfe, who was absolutely terrific. Josh Lucas is great as the slimy Ford executive who comes to embody the kind of the corporate strategy. He's a kind of hissable villain. And it's shot by Phelan Pappenmichael, who, let's not forget, Phelan Pappenmichael, like Wally Pfister, started out in erotic thrillers, did Dance of the Dams, Trip to Kill 2, Body Chemistry, worked with Cat Shea on Poison Ivy, and then moved into, much more mainstream features. And I knew nothing about the story. I had seen the poster, and I had been slightly snarky about the poster. In fact, I said to James King, I pointed to the picture of Christian Bale. I said, is he going to do that expression through the whole film? Because the poster doesn't give any sense of just how much fun the film is. It's also very melancholic, and because it's about motor racing, which is a sport in which there is a life and death situation going on. But I thought it was really surprisingly entertaining.